So, Ohio State is saying there's a quarterback. Welcome to Snap Judgments. It is Monday at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center, and Ryan Day has made it official. Julian Sayin is the starting quarterback for Ohio State, just as we've posited, expected, anticipated all along. Lincoln Keynotes did make it a competitive battle. Both Ryan Day, Brian Hartline, Matt Patricia, both coordinators and the head coach, all talking about how fun it was to watch those guys compete. But ultimately, Julian Sayin had started to, pull away over the last week. Second scrimmage was Saturday. Buckeyes gave it a couple days to think about it and now have made it official. Now you get 2 full weeks of Julian Sayin getting the majority of the reps with the ones to get ready for the Texas debut and his first start as an Ohio State Buckeye.
Yeah, and Ryan Day said it was pretty much in the last week where things really started to separate, and that's what made sense based on, at some point, Julian's talent is going to rise to the top. And it's been a battle. And Brian Hartline said, we were in a real battle. So again, I know people want to believe whatever they want to believe. Like, this is just manufactured by Ohio State to create a fire under people's butts or whatever. But it's not surprising that hearing Ryan Day talk about it, it came down to the processor. It came down to getting the ball out of his hand quickly. It came down to understanding the big picture of the defense, because those are the things that a long-time seasoned quarterback possesses. And that is where Julian's always been different than Lincoln in this battle. And it's not surprising to hear that. We mentioned after the Saturday practice when we were out here 2 weeks ago that there were times when Lincoln Keynotes would hold on to the ball a little longer than you'd want, and you think to yourself, well, in a game that's probably a sack or it leads to a turnover. And Ryan Day said that Julian has been better in the last week, making the routine plays routinely. The processor's there, getting rid of the ball quickly, seeing the defense, and ultimately the first thing he said, which is always the most telling, we want a quarterback that's accurate with the football. Innately accurate, is that what he said?
He said, we need to be able to throw the football, is what he said. And I think we've increasingly made this point that if Ohio State had been trying or needs to at some point build an offense around Lincoln Keynotes, it would look very different. There is simply no question about the accuracy, quick release, arm talent across the board. Julian Sayin has had that going into it, camp, going through spring, everything. That wasn't really ever going to be the issue. It was putting all the other pieces together. And Ryan Day talked about, making the routine plays routinely, command of the huddle. Ohio State is going to continue to huddle. They're not going back to, spreading the field and losing some of that leadership component that they really liked with Will Howard a year ago. And Ryan Day thought that was critical. So that's got to continue. And that was the part that they were, pushing Julian Sayin to unlock that. It appears that he has now enough that Ohio State is naming him the starter. Now the next step is, by the way, you have to go into the horseshoe in 12 days and try and beat a Texas defense. That is no walk in the park, not going to be easy. But I think that's why it was important at this point, August 18th, to make that decision and allow him to get comfortable, allow the Buckeyes to build that chemistry, build a game plan, get ready for Texas, and give Julian Sayin the best opportunity to win that game.
Yeah, and Julian earned it. So let's be clear. Like in the last week, as Ryan Day said, that's when separation happens. I spoke to a pretty dialed-in source here on Sunday, and he said they're going to review the tape from Saturday. If Julian earned it on Saturday, they will name him on Monday. There was obviously the asterisk, like, hey, we'd love more time, but we don't have it. Like that Texas game is in 2 weeks. It's time to start preparing. And that was really the thing for me. What we took away from Ryan Day on Monday is that whether it's the offensive line, whether it's linebacker, safety, you asked a question you asked a question about how many guys are ready to go, and you were trying to figure out right tackle, I think. And Ryan Day gave a litany of answers, a lengthy answer about every position and how many guys.
I'll gladly take more information.
Yeah, sure. How many guys were ready to go at each position. We beat the quarterback horse to death. I don't know that there's anything else to talk about there. But was there anything out of what Ryan Day said about the other positions that captured your attention or that was a surprise to you?
Yeah, I certainly did want to know if they were able to nail down the right tackle situation. At least that's the way I view it. I could be wrong about that. There are different components where Ohio State can move Tiger Shabola inside or out, or from guard to tackle. Ethan Onyano can go from tackle to guard. You have flexibility with Josh Padilla and Carson Hinsman in the middle, although I would be surprised at this point if anything changes based on what we expect at left tackle, left guard, center, and right guard. I think that is going to be the four that we've talked about since Austin Sehraveld was officially designated on Monday, even though we unofficially had designated him as the left tackle for the last
Ryan Day did on Monday say he is the
left tackle. So, given the way that Ohio State has talked, the scrimmage reviews that have leaked out that we have heard, it sure seems to me like Phillip Daniels is going to start against Texas. And the only thing that perked my ears up a little bit on that was Ryan Day said, we think we know who the 5 are, but 6 and 7 are probably going to play in this game. And I don't think that's unexpected. I think that's the way of college football. That is in response to the way the Buckeyes had to manage their offensive line a year ago. So you're going to see Ethan Onyanwa. Who exactly is number 7? I think it depends on the day.
Depends on what position you might need somebody.
We've heard a lot about Gabe Van Sickle and Jake Cook doing some things on the interior that add some extra depth. Ian Moore has had a good camp, building on a good camp in spring. So it is still being number 7 would be an achievement all on its own. But I guess if you had to ask me today where I would put money down, I would say that Phillip Daniels is starting.
What do you make of the discussion? He said, we are going to rotate on the offensive line similar to like we did last year. Do you view that? And this is where I'm trying to, we didn't really deep dive into it with him today because so much of the conversation was about the quarterbacks, but is it likely that rotation is just between right tackle and right guard, or do you think that extends to Luke Montgomery at left guard?
I don't.
Because it certainly does not extend to Carson Hinsman at center or, at this point, Austin Sarabeld at left tackle. So is it rotating Tegra, Ethan Onyanwa, Luke, and Phillip Daniels and moving them all around? Or is it, in your mind, just at right tackle? Because that's what it sounds like you're saying, but I'm just trying to figure out
I don't really know
how you took that.
I wanted to follow up on that, and I won't really get it. And you're actually doing it today probably didn't make sense. The way that Ryan Day was describing it, he's like, well, there are some things that they can continue to work throughout this week. And the question that is in my mind, and I will ask it, I guess a week from tomorrow, a Texas Week press conference, and maybe we won't even get a clear answer on that, but the rotation as we've known it specific to Ohio State involved a triumvirate of guards and interior play. I wonder if it is more difficult, is harder to make yourself do that at tackle. I wonder if tackle is viewed as a separate conversation because it is so difficult to play. The skill set mentality, physicality is so unique to play out there on the edge that I wonder,
especially against Texas.
I wonder how much flexibility, rotation you would consider if you were in Ryan Day's shoes or Tyler Bowen's shoes at tackle. It feels to me like it would be easier to do that at guard. Doesn't mean that you can't or won't do it at tackle, but that will be the next step. Because I think that the way Ryan Day described it, there wasn't going to be a definitive decision on that coming from him publicly on this Monday.
It seems it's confusing because the old football adage is that the closer you get to the football, the more complicated things get. But at the same time, when you're talking about rotating guards, it seems a lot easier than putting somebody on an island who isn't necessarily prepared or coming in off the bench against someone like Colin Simmons, where you're like, well, I don't know that this is the time you want to rotate. So I view it as like whoever the starting right tackle is next week, and I think we're both on the same page thinking it's going to be Phillip Daniels when that game kicks off against Texas. If he doesn't go out there and really establish himself early, then I think there's a conversation to be had for Grambling in Ohio. But this is what it's similar in some ways to the quarterback discussion. You have to know who's going to be doing what, because if you're Phillip Daniels or if you're Ethan Onyanwa, whoever is starting at right tackle, you need to be able to cut on that tape and say, this is my job for the next 2 weeks. So it does get interesting from that perspective. Ryan Day mentioned 3 safeties that they believe can play, which I think is not enough. But he did later in his press conference single out Leroy Roker and Fahim Delane as guys who have started to make a move. Is there any other position? He said 4 linebackers, which the question is, is it Riley Pettijohn who's the 4th, or is it Garrett Stover who's the 4th?
I think it would probably be Garrett Stover. I think James Laurinaitis, I think, was setting the stage for Riley Pettijohn to have a prominent role on special teams this year, a couple weeks ago. I think because he also, his description, his evaluation of Riley Pettijohn was quick to point back to, well, there's a lot of things about playing linebacker, especially at Ohio State, for James Laurinaitis, for Matt Patricia, that are going to be difficult, and maybe a true freshman is not quite ready for them. Physically, you could put him out there, and he looks totally
at home, at peace,
totally comfortable.
Normal.
He not normal because he is also
he looks like he belongs out there.
He belongs, and
it took me a while to get there.
But in terms of knowing all the responsibilities, being able to take practice to the field. I don't know that he's quite there at that point, but I think Garrett Stover probably is.
Well, I mean, again, from a mindset standpoint and physically, Garrett Stover is as good as anybody around here. It's just about when you're out there and put in a position to make plays, are you able to do it? So the freakish athleticism that Garrett Stover has made it just when he said 4, I was like, yeah, that's interesting. I'd like to know who that 4th is.
And he knew, and Ryan Day knew that. He's like, you guys are going to ask.
Yeah, so we'll figure that out as these next couple days unfold. But Ryan Day, did he seem relieved today? Because it felt like to me, the weight was off the shoulders, just saying, okay, we got our guy, now you can figure it out. And he did acknowledge, similar to what we talked about the other day here, is that there's a little bit of 2021 CJ Stroud to this decision. Not necessarily the competition itself, but to what Julian Sayin is, how they see his upside, understanding that there's going to be some peaks and valleys. Was that what you expected him to say when asked about proper expectations for Julian?
The process, the way that the schedule lines up is not easy. And any first-time starter is going to encounter those challenges. I think it's a question that's well worth asking and an answer that I don't know, I guess mildly surprised that Ryan Day went into that level of detail, but it provides the proper context for it. Yeah. I think the same is true for Arch Manning, by the way. Like going into the Horseshoe on August 30th against the Ohio State defense on the road is not going to be very easy, and it'll probably look a little bit wonky. I think as we start to turn the page towards what is this game actually going to look like, if there is all this attention on 2 5-star quarterbacks and Arch Manning and Julian Sayin and this battle and a duel between those two, I don't think that's what it's not going to be a shootout in the OH Corral. It is going to be, 2 elite defenses that are going to make life hell for 2 first-time starting quarterbacks.
Things out, yeah.
And so we'll see what that looks like. Julian Sayin has the benefit of throwing to Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate and Brandon Ennis and Max Clare and a running game that I think is going to be pretty good. Like, that's helpful. Arch Manning has weapons too, but he's also working behind a new offensive line. So, I'm not trying to avoid it, because the other part about comparing Julian Sayin right now to 2021 CJ Stroud is that by week 2, he was throwing for 480 yards against a top 25 opponent. So I don't know if that's going to happen either. Yeah. But then there
won't be a top 25 opponent in week 2. That's for sure.
You're right.
Yeah.
That would be stunning if that happened. But I definitely don't think that's going to happen in week 1. And I don't think that Ryan Day is going to build a game plan that would ask him to do so. That would be probably a waste of resources.
Yeah, I mean, no matter what happens in week 1 with Julian Sayin, like, there's going to be an overreaction one way or the other. It's going to be like he can't do it, or he's the greatest player of all time. And there's no middle ground, I think, for people when it comes to what you expect a 5-star number 1 ranked quarterback to be. But there still is that learning curve that he's going to have to deal with, I would imagine.
Yeah, we'll see, because it's now 12 days away.
Did Patricia or Brian Hartline say anything that really, just to snap judgments, and we're snapping.
Yeah, we're snapping.
But, before we ride off into our sunset, like, what did those guys say that?
I didn't think there was a ton of actual pressing news.
I was peeing when.
That's a lot of information.
When Brian Hartline started. Did anybody ask him about the quote from Ryan Day saying the play calling is the easiest part of the job?
No.
Shoot. Missed that opportunity.
I know. You should have been right there.
Yep.
Poor hydration plan. Overly hydrated.
You got to do what you got to do.
I don't think that there wasn't depth chart conversation. There was insight about the quarterback battle, really, from both sides of that. You asked Matt Patricia about what it's looked like, Julian Sayin in the decision making.
I asked that question because in the spring game, Ohio State ran 2 defensive fronts. They did not do any adjustments. They did not do any audibling. They did not do any motions. And so I wanted to know from his perspective, how different is Julian? How confident are you? This is a guy who's not just a college football defense coordinator, who's a former NFL head coach, 3-time Super Bowl champion.
Also an NFL
offensive coordinator. Like, what did you see? How did it get harder to scheme against him in these last couple weeks? And I appreciated his answer. I don't know that he was going to give me much more than he did, but Brian Hartline obviously asked a lot about wide receivers. Ryan Day said that the receiver room, they're trying to figure out if they're 6 deep or not.
I don't think they're going to play 6.
Based on Brian Hartline's response when asked about Mylan Graham, I feel like this is a room that's sticking at probably 5, at least heading into Texas. Do you
I think it'd be a stretch. Like the fourth wide receiver, as good as the future is for Bryson Rodgers and Mylan Graham, both the fourth wide receiver is going to be Max Clare.
Yeah.
So like I don't think in that particular game we're going to see
4 or 5 very often.
I don't know that it's going to be that deep of an arsenal. I think it will be over time, but as much as I'm anticipating for Mylan Graham at some point, I think as you get into this game and you want to put Julian Sayin in position to win, that is going to involve making sure that the best wide receivers are on the field for him as much as possible. And maybe I'm way off base on that, and maybe Ohio State believes that the entire 6 or 4 or 5 are ready to go and there would be no drop-off. I think this is when you're talking about the talent-equated games, and if you look over the history of Ryan Day and in these situations, he's going to lean on his best players to play as many snaps as possible. And guess what? They're not going to be needed in the 2 games after that, and then there's an off week. So I think this is not a situation like a normal opener where you're hoping to go get everybody involved and get the feet wet and get rolling. They're going to try and beat Texas, and if Jeremiah Smith has built his body to take every snap in that game, then he will.
It's kind of weird playing the Super Bowl in the first game of the year and the last game of the year, but that's where you're at. So everything has to be on the table for Texas, but also at the same time, like a lot of these guys who are going to play a major role on this team throughout the year probably aren't going to be seen against Texas because you just have to. I mean, Ryan Day said the expectation for Julian Sayin in week 1 is just win. I don't care if it's 14-13, 1 more point than them. Like, this is not, again, I think the expectation when you have the recruiting accolades and all of the discussion around Julian and Arch, I think this is like a 17-14 type of final. Like, I don't see where either team is putting up 28 to 35 points in this game. So it's going to be a little rock fight, I think.
Well, they played 8 months ago, and it took a defensive touchdown at the end to make it 28-14. Yeah. These are 2 really good defenses, 2 really good programs. And as you said, it's going to be now Julian Sayin officially against Arch Manning. So we're 12 days away. Be a few more snap judgments between now and then. But the picture is coming into focus for the Buckeyes as we get even closer to the season opener. Can't wait. These have been some snappy Jays on a Monday after Ryan Day, Matt Patricia, and Brian Hartline updated the media on the progress. He's Berm, I'm Austin, and we will talk to you tomorrow on The Beat.